The time is at hand.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
One of the many spirits said to haunt the area.
Unknown animal attack.
We need a great reset.
Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen.
Welcome to In Dark Places. My name is Junebug Fugit. Jimmy Haunted is on assignment. Hey, can we stop burning Canada already? Canada didn't bother anybody, they're just up there being Canadians. And it's pretty common knowledge now that the government can control the weather, so why don't they just make it rain there? Or California or anywhere else is having droughts and fires and stuff. Kind of fishy. I think I have a new Guardian Angel story. On June 28th, I was out with my little weed whacker trimmer thing, cutting the weeds out on the outside of my fence next to the creek. It was like a jungle over there. It was taller than me. I don't get around to doing that much. So I decided I was going to do it and then maybe provide some more sunshine for my garden. But I got out there on the other side of the fence and there's a narrow walkway at the top of the fence. It's a little flat area. And then it drops down into the creek. And I was trying to work my way through those weeds and was holding onto the fence as I used the weed whacker thing with my left hand, and I was holding on with my right hand, and I was just kind of working my way down the fence line, and I missed the fence with my right hand and just fell straight backward into the creek. And it's like a good 10-foot drop because I'm 6'4", and the creek bank itself is like probably 4 feet high, and so my head just dived 10 feet down. And I landed on a rock on my left ear. I have a big old bruise behind my left ear now. It's nasty. But it's kind of weird that I didn't get hurt any worse than what I did. I should have broke my neck or my arm or something. But instead I just fell backward into the arms of the angels. Trust fall. So shout out to the angels. You guys are taking care of me. Hey, it's time for shout outs. I never can remember to do this. Shout out to Dark Matters and Mysteries of Western Pennsylvania and beyond. Those guys always share our episodes and they're spreading the good word. So thanks, guys. Shout out to UFO Fred. He always shares our posts and episodes. Steve, Paul, Matt, Michelle, James, Dylan, Tim. Shout out to new listeners. The Proof Seekers. Check those guys out. Lee, Jose, Blake, and another Blake. Above and Below Paranormal. Check them out. Will, Sheila, Ashley, Do a Supernatural Brandy, Stephen and Jen. Thanks for listening, guys. And now here is the Nicolas Cage Meltdown of the Week.
Was there anything I could have done?
You were exposed. We were there. As a commander in the Imperial Japanese Navy, it was my duty to kill you. But as a man, I have regrets.
I had a good idea of what we were carrying. I too did my duty. But as a man, I find no honor in it.
don't really have a general topic this week, so I'm just going to be jumping around all over the place. Starting with this story. I've done some pretty stupid things in my life, especially between the ages of 15 and 18. Really stupid things. Things that will probably haunt me for the rest of my life. Here's one thing that I did when I was about 15 that I've been wanting to talk about on the show for a while now, but I couldn't do it. I think I'm going to do it now. I'm a cat person. I love cats. I've had a cat by my side since before I even learned how to walk. I would never do anything to hurt a cat. So if you're with PETA, just forget about it. Because what I'm about to say happened when I was young and stupid. Don't put me in jail over this. I'm sorry. I apologize. When I was around 15 years old, in 1992, the girl next door had a cat. Except she didn't really have a cat. It stayed at our house all the time and ate all of our cats' food. I tried every way in the world to keep that cat away from our cats while they were eating. I would put the cat food bowl up on top of the car and on top of the house, under the house, everywhere. And somehow Patches, the cat, would still figure out how to take my cat's food. It got pretty annoying. I spent most of that summer trying to figure out a way to outsmart Patches. And one day, I thought it would be a good idea to throw Patches across the creek. Yes, I was stupid, remember? This was a good-sized creek. My reasoning was that the cat would never be able to find a way back across the creek to my house. See, cats hate water, so it would be stranded over there forever and never take my cat's food again. And cats always land on their feet, so there was no way Patches would get hurt by me throwing her across the creek. This was my big plan. So one day, Patches was eating my cat's food, like always, and I picked her up and carried her to the widest part of the creek and tossed her, underhand, by the way, across the creek. It worked out just like I envisioned it. Patches landed on her feet on the opposite side of the creek. But before I could celebrate, something weird happened. When Patches landed, she started mysteriously running around in circles on the rocks that covered the creek bank. It almost looked like the cat was bathwater circling the drain. After going around for 2 or 3 times, the cat vanished. It was as if she melted into the rocks. It was probably the craziest thing I've ever seen. Immediately, my buddy and I crossed the creek, started looking under the rocks for the cat. It was gone. Did it go into another dimension? Are we living in a matrix? I don't know. It was crazy. And I seem to remember seeing the cat around the neighborhood a couple times after that. But it never did come back to my house and eat my cat's food again. Again, I repeat, I love cats. This was a stupid thing to do. I wish I would have never done it. But what in the world happened? This is a story sent in by our friend Paul. Thanks, Paul. Airline pilot spots UFO by Bang Showbiz. Thanks, Bang. A pilot has reported seeing a UFO mid-flight. Virginia-based airline captain Julius Figueroa had been on a routine flight over the Midwest when he spotted what he believed was an unidentified flying object around 15 feet to his left and claimed that members of his team could see it also. He told WSHV, "We were climbing to about 10,000 feet, and at around 4,300 feet, I was looking into the distance, and this thing caught my eye. It started getting closer, and it was approaching me by about 15 feet to my left, heading north. 3 of them see it, including one of the instructors. By the time I turned around, it was already on the horizon." Julius, who described the object as a spherical golden orb, tried to raise the alarm by calling air traffic control, but to no avail, as they failed to notice the object he believed he had seen. He added, "There was a long pause on the other end, And then they said they didn't see it. You're right, they saw it. Shout out to Creepy Acres on Facebook for bringing this story to my attention. In Arkansas folklore, the White River Monster is a large creature reportedly first spotted off the banks of the White River near Newport in northeastern Arkansas. Although reported in the press as a monster, it is reported to be deeply loved by neighborhood residents near this portion of the White River, and the monster is referred to locally as Whitey. Some believe the White River Monster may have affected the Civil War. The river was used for transportation, and the monster was supposedly responsible for overturning a boat. Sightings of the monster began in 1915. On July 1st of that year, an owner of a plantation near the river saw the monster. He reported it having gray skin and as wide as a car and 3 cars long. As the news spread, construction of a rope net began, but ended due to lack of money and materials. In the first week of 1937, recreational fishermen noticed that they were finding it hard to land many fish, and the creature was spotted again and reported to Bramlett Bateman, a nearby plantation owner, who later confirmed the sightings, describing it as having the skin of an elephant, 4 or 5 feet wide by 12 feet long, with the face of a catfish, lolling on the surface of the water. Feeling the creature was a threat to his crops, he intended to blow up the eddy where the creature was spotted with TNT, but area authorities denied necessary permission. A minor media sensation resulted in visitors from across the nation, some bringing cameras, explosives, and a machine gun. And when no more sightings were made, when a plan to capture it with a giant net failed, and when a deep-sea diver failed to find the creature, Bateman was thought to have created a hoax, despite over 100 confirmed sightings recorded during the short period of excitement. The White River Monster was sighted again in the summer of 1971. That year, eyewitnesses who encountered the creature described it as the size of a boxcar, with a bone protruding from its forehead. It looked as if the thing was peeling all over, but it was a smooth type of skin or flesh, said one, and it made strange noises that sounded like a combination of a cow's moo and a horse's neigh. Other accounts of the White River Monster described 3-toed tracks, 14 inches in length, on Towhead Island, leading down to the river through a path of bent trees and crushed bushes. In 1973, the Arkansas State Legislature signed into law a bill by State Senator Robert Harvey creating the White River Monster Refuge along the White River. The area is located between the southern point on the river known as Old Grand Glaze and a northern point on White River known as Rosie. It is illegal to harm the monster inside the refuge, so don't even try it. Could you spend the night at one of the world's most haunted hotels? Yeah. This is the Toffelholm Herrgård in Sweden. A man called Jonas Skota first founded the Toffelholm, and he became nobility. It was later turned into a fort by his grandson and became part of Sweden's defense system against Denmark. According to legend, there is an underground passage from the fort to the northern wing of the manor house. Today, the hotel lures visitors with its country house charm and lovely lakeside spa, but it also capitalizes on its creepy past by hosting regular murder mystery evenings. The Crescent Hotel and Spa in USA, often cited as the most haunted hotel in America, the 1886 Crescent in the Ozark Mountains, has a grisly history. The building was originally opened as a hotel in the spa town of Eureka Springs, but was transformed into Baker's Cancer Curing Hospital in 1937. Norman Baker, a former magician with zero medical training, claimed to be able to treat cancer patients here. Unfortunately, many perished under Baker's pseudo-care, and now reportedly wander around the hotel. What about the Bourbon Orleans Hotel? A proliferation of phantoms have been spotted prowling around the grand rooms and halls of French Quarter Grand Dame, the Bourbon Orleans Hotel. It is not surprising the hotel has a certain ambience given it has a history stretching back some 300 years. In this time, the building has been used as a ballroom, theater, convent, and orphanage, so there's plenty of stories steeped into its walls. One of the most poignant spooky tales of the Bourbon Orleans is the little girl who's been seen rolling a ball and chasing it down the 6th floor corridors. She's thought to have been a victim of the yellow fever epidemic that struck New Orleans when the hotel was used as a convent and orphanage. There's also the solitary dancing ghost who has been seen in the hotel's famous Orleans ballroom, which hosted some of the city's grandest social events in the 19th century, and the Confederate soldier who's sometimes spotted on the 6th and 3rd floors. The Bourbon Orleans hasn't shied away from its paranormal past, opening its doors to ghost hunters on guided tours of the Big Easy's creepiest sites. I want to go. A brilliant diplomat saved from death by the intervention of supernatural forces. This spectacular story, in various guises, traveled the world in the late Victorian period. This is the story of Lord Dufferin by Melvin Harris. Thanks, Melvin. Fate was kind to Frederick Temple Hamilton Temple Blackwood, the first Marquis of Dufferin and Ava. In 1893, he was saved, so his chronicles tell us, by supernatural intervention from a violent death. The story begins some 10 years earlier when Lord Dufferin was enjoying a welcome break from the incessant bustle of diplomatic life. His distinguished career had already included 6 years as Governor General of Canada, and in 1883 he was completing a report on British government reorganization in Egypt. A great house near Tullamore in County Offaly, Ireland, seemed to provide an ideal refuge for anyone seeking tranquility. But one night, this peaceful idyll was shattered by a terrifying apparition. Lord Dufferin was in bed when he suddenly found himself wide awake, sick with terror. He had been awoken by strange sounds from the grounds outside, terrifying sounds. However, Lord Dufferin was no coward. He climbed out of bed to investigate. Trembling in every limb and heart racing, he went to the French windows and peered out. He could see the trim lawns, bathed in moonlight. Almost every section was in plain view, except for one spot, where tall trees cast long black shadows. And from these shadows came the sounds that had awoken him. Heart-rending sobs, more animal than human. Lord Dufferin began to fumble with the window latches, and, as he did so, a man staggered out of the shadows into the moonlight. He was bent double under the weight of a load on his back. At first sight, it looked like a long linen chest. But as the man came closer, Dufferin suddenly became aware that the chest was, in fact, a coffin. Lord Dufferin threw open the windows, ran across the lawn, and shouted at the man to halt. Until then, the man's face had been held down and hidden. But on hearing the shout, he lifted his head and turned it towards Lord Dufferin, and in the moonlight, on a face that was unforgettably loathsome, so contorted with hate that Lord Dufferin stopped dead in his tracks. Then he drew on his reserves of courage, advanced on the man, and walked right through him. At the same time, the man disappeared, coffin and all. And with his disappearance, the gloom lifted, and the house and the grounds became as calm and restful as ever. Lord Dufferin returned to his bedroom, shaken and puzzled. Then, after writing a complete account of the event in his diary, he managed to snatch some sleep. At breakfast the next morning, he read out loud his account and appealed to his host and fellow guests for an explanation. But no one could help. The description of the man matched no one in the area, past or present. There wasn't even a local ghost to blame, and so the event remained an inexplicable mystery. Over the years, the memory of that night stayed with Lord Dufferin, but it no longer troubled him. He grew to believe that it might really have been nothing more than an extraordinary, vivid nightmare. And that is how things stood for the next 10 years. And then in 1893, the vision took on a new significance. At the time, Lord Dufferin was the British ambassador to France, and was obliged to attend a diplomatic reception at the Grand Hotel in Paris. When he entered the hotel foyer, he found it jam-packed with impatient guests, for the lift was taking ages to make its trips to the reception area on the top floor. Together with his secretary, he joined the queue for the lift. Eventually, he reached the head of the queue. The lift arrived, its door squealed open, and the attendant waved the guests in. Lord Dufferin turned pale, stood fast, and refused to enter. He mumbled an excuse to the officials with him, then stepped backwards, pulling his secretary with him. Nothing would persuade him to use that lift, for the lift attendant was, in every feature, the double of that hideous man he had seen 10 years earlier in Ireland. The other officials ignored the eccentric Englishman. They crowded into the lift, and it began its laborious climb. Lord Dufferin, meanwhile, went hunting for the manager's office. He had to know who the lift attendant was and where he came from. But before the Marquis reached the office, there came a disaster. The lift's cable snapped, and it plunged down the shaft to destruction. The passengers were killed outright, as was the ghastly lift attendant. No one ever came forward or identified the attendant's body. The hotel manager could answer no questions either, for the attendant was a casual worker taken on for the day, a man without documents or records. Lord Dufferin was baffled. But not even his money and influence could turn up a single fact about the man. The one certainty was that his strange vision at Tullamore had saved Dufferin's life. One of the best documented cases of a medium producing ectoplasmic forms is that of Eva C. Many in the first decade of the 20th century, a young French girl living in Algiers began to exhibit remarkable psychic powers. Martha Beraud, the daughter of a French army officer, was apparently able to produce full-form materializations of an ectoplasmic substance during seances. As her abilities as a medium became known, she came under the scrutiny of some of Europe's leading psychical researchers, many of whom were convinced that the phenomena produced by Eva C., the pseudonym for Martha Beraud, were genuine ectoplasmic teloplasms. But the suspicion of fraud arose very early in Eva's career. In 1904, a lawyer named Marsault attended seances held at the Villa Carmen, home of the Noel family, who ran a spiritualist circle, and claimed that the young medium confessed she faked the phenomena for fun. Yet less than a year later, one of the most respected investigators of the day, Professor Charles Rickett, published a favorable report of Eva's mediumship. Rickett elaborated upon his experiences with Eva in his book 30 Years of Psychical Research from 1923, and said he had been able to see the first lineaments of materializations as they were formed. A kind of liquid or pasty jelly emerges from the mouth or the breast of Martha, which organizes itself by degrees, acquiring the shape of a face or a limb. I have seen this paste spread on my knee and slowly take form so as to show the rudiment of the radius, the cubitus, or metacarpal bone. Rickett admitted that these formations were often very imperfect. Sometimes they looked like flat images, so that in spite of oneself, one is inclined to imagine some fraud, since what appears seems to be the materialization of a semblance and not of a being. But at other times, Eva did produce recognizable spirit forms. Rickett witnessed one such materialization at the Villa Carmen. At first it was only a white opaque spot, like a handkerchief, lying on the ground before the curtain. And then this handkerchief quickly assumed the form of a human head, level with the floor, and a few moments later it rose up in a straight line and became a small man enveloped in a kind of a white burnous, who took 2 or 3 halting steps in front of the curtain and then sank to the floor and disappeared, as if through a trapdoor. But there was no trapdoor. Another testimony comes from Dr. Gustave Galli of France, who wrote in his book, From the Unconscious to the Conscious, in 1919, "From the mouth of Eva there descends to her knees a cord of white substance, of the thickness of 2 fingers. The cord detaches itself from the medium and moves toward me. I then see the extremity thicken like a swelling, and this terminal swelling expands into a perfectly modeled hand. I touch it. It gives a normal sensation. I feel the bones and the fingers with their nails. And then the hand contracts, diminishes, and disappears in the end of the cord." Whatever others may have thought of Eva's strange mediumistic powers, Galli was in no doubt. "I do not merely say there was no trickery, I say there was no possibility of trickery. The materializations took place under my own eyes, and I have observed the genesis and development." A spirit who regularly appeared at Eva's seances was Bien Beau, who was said to have died 300 years earlier. One remarkable picture shows him with a thick beard, wearing a helmet, and draped with ectoplasm. Rickett maintained that on 5 or 6 occasions he saw both Bien Beau and Eva at the same time. The phantom's eyes moved, and so did his lips as he tried to speak. The witnesses could also hear him breathing, and the professor used a flask containing a chemical solution to test if Bien Beau's breath contained carbon dioxide, and it did. At another seance, a beautiful Egyptian princess was seen. The spirit, said Rickett, was well defined and wore a gilt ribbon or diadem in her fair hair. She was laughing, and he could see her pearly teeth. Rickett was told to bring scissors the following day so that he could cut a lock of the spirit's hair. When the woman materialized again, he saw that she had very abundant hair, though he had trouble distinguishing her face. As I was about to cut a lock of her hair high up, a firm hand behind the curtain lowered mine so that I cut only about 6 inches from the end, and I have kept this lock. It is very fine, silky, and undyed. Microscopical examination shows it to be real hair. Martha's hair is very dark, and she wears her hair very short. Was it possible that Eva was producing these phenomena by smuggling props into the seance room? Many other mediums have been caught doing so before and since, but Rickett and other investigators went to great lengths to satisfy themselves that the medium was not using trickery. At seances conducted by the German physician Baron von Schreck Notzing over a 4-year period, the most stringent precautions were taken. The seance cabinet, which was usually a curtained section of the room, was searched. Eva was stripped naked in front of witnesses and then clothed in a close-fitting garment from neck to feet. Often her head was completely covered by a veil, which was then sewn to her other garments. Despite all these measures, skeptics still suggested that Eva was somehow able to secrete props on her person. The investigators carried out examinations, but the medium was never found to be hiding anything. Another theory was that she was able to swallow the props and regurgitate them during the seance. She was therefore given syrup of bilberries to drink so that it would color anything she had swallowed. But the ectoplasma that subsequently appeared was as white as before. At those seances that produced results, a white substance often appeared. This would change shape, move around slowly, and throw out antenna-like spikes. Sometimes it would form itself into a perfect hand in which nails and bones could be detected. It would then return to a blob of white and disappear. Rickett described the phenomenon as a luminous and plastic emanation proceeding usually from her mouth, sometimes from her navel, sometimes from her armpits, and sometimes from her breast. It is a whitish substance that creeps as if alive, with damp, cold, protoplasmic extensions that are transformed into a hand, fingers, a head, or even into an entire figure. After her run of successful seances with Gelly, Eva's powers seem to have declined. She visited London in 1920 and held 40 seances for the Society of Psychical Research over a 2-month period, but half of those were blank and others resulted in only weak phenomena. Although no evidence of fraud was detected, the SPR committee suggested that regurgitation of paper and fabric could have produced the materializations they witnessed. In 1922, Eva gave a series of 15 seances at the Sorbonne in Paris, but these were equally inconclusive. Both Eva and her materializations faded into obscurity. She is thought to have died in 1943. And that's about all the show this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Lots of cool stories. Thanks, Paul Chadwick. We'll see you again right here next week. God bless you.